Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of the Silver Screen Action Figure Podcast. This is your host, Andre Joseph, and once again, I am reunited with my partner in crime here, Mr. Albert Albanese.
Hey, guys, what's going on? How is everybody today?
And in today's episode, where we are going to be focusing on Transformers, specifically the animated 1986 film, as well as the 5 Michael Bay movies and the recent Bumblebee solo film, I have to profess as a confession that I am not exactly the biggest Transformers fan in the world. I kind of got into it late in the game. So I decided to bring in two of my friends who actually inspired me to get into it and are bigger Transformer fans than I am. So today I'm joined by my friends Tom Melendez and Charlie Cannon. Say hello, guys.
What's up?
Hey, what's up?
All right, so Transformers. Like I said earlier, I wasn't exactly the biggest fan of it growing up. I was more of a G.I. Joe type of person when it came to Hasbro, as well as with the WWF toys. I did have some of the figures when they first came out. I had an Optimus Prime. I had that alligator-looking Decepticon, and those Pretender figures that came out late in the game, which looked kind of cool from the commercials. It really wasn't until late 90s when the Beast Wars line came out when I started kind of getting into that, because I would watch the cartoon every weekday morning. So that sort of hooked me into it for a brief period. But then you guys, Charlie and Tom, once I got to know you guys when I was in high school, you guys were obviously the big obsessed fans who collected all the toys and, watched the cartoon, had the DVDs, and, obviously the 86 film, which I remember seeing with my cousin on video. Actually, the first time I saw it was in Florida on a vacation. And, I wasn't exactly appreciative of it until I got much older in terms of its storyline and how groundbreaking it was in its approach with the animation and the storyline in itself. So I think that kind of got me into it more in college because of the upcoming movie that was coming out at the time. So I was sort of familiarizing myself with that. So I guess for each of you guys, just to kind of start it off, what was your early experience with Transformers?
My earliest Transformer toy had to have been obviously Optimus Prime. I mean, he was on all the shelves, and he was the one. He's the leader of the Autobots. He had the red, white, and blue All American. That was the guy right there. As far as I remember, he was the first toy that really caught my eye when I was into Transformers and I wanted to get the toys. Unfortunately, being that he was so popular, you couldn't really find him around my neighborhood. So my father actually got me a Soundwave, which was just as good, honestly. He was awesome. He was my favorite Decepticon. So that's definitely my first time with really interacting with the toys. Optimus Prime was just on the top of the totem pole. But there's plenty of other toys that came out too. They were great.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to say, Soundwave is probably my first memory, because my brother older than me, he had him, and I would play with him. Yeah, definitely probably Soundwave. And I remember, the later Transformer, his name was Counter Punch. He transformed from a Decepticon to an Autobot, and then to a car. And I remember actually getting him in a store in Brooklyn. And I don't even know how I remember it, but I remember seeing the old boxes behind the shelves, the glass.
Yeah,
and,
there's so many.
Even the old school boxes bring up so many memories.
Yeah, I remember those boxes. Just with they had the file cards in the back, and didn't some of them come with the comic book?
No, they didn't come with a comic, but they came with the catalog with all the other figures.
Oh yes.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah. Oh man, I loved sitting in the toy store, waiting for my brothers to pick out some action figure that I had no care in the world for. As I sat there reading the bios of each Autobot, their favorite habits, what their strengths and weaknesses are. I love the whole
Oh yeah.
That whole setup was everything for me.
Mm-hmm.
The red visor thing you got to put on the tech stack.
What's that?
Remember the red visor you have to put on the tech stack to see what their strengths were?
Yeah. I love those, man. Those are great.
Yeah, Albert, did you
Me.
ever collect them or like watch the cartoon when you were younger?
So I watched the cartoon. I wasn't huge into the idea of them when I got it. I had gotten older because I was more of like action figure kind of a guy. But I remember when I was younger, yeah, I was really big. The first one I ever got was Starscream, and then after that, I kind of started building up my collection from there. Which is why, as a kid, I mean, you know, I was more of a Decepticons fan, just specifically because Starscream was my first ever Transformer that I got, and I didn't know any better. You know, I watched the cartoons a little bit, but I kind of got the toy a little bit before I got huge into the cartoon. Then once I got the cartoon, I was like, oh, well, Starscream's my favorite. He's the one I have. And then I started building my collection from there. And I remember that there was, and I'm not 100% sure if it was just because it was right around the same time period, but did they ever come out with them in like a couple of them in McDonald's?
Yes.
Like McDonald's toys?
Oh, yeah.
They did.
Okay. So I did have like that entire collection.
Nice. Yeah, a lot of people collected those because they were, you know, they were cool. You know, they're little Transformers, and you know they're easy to switch around. You didn't have to like memorize the sequence in order to actually enjoy it. You know, because it was like a 3-step process.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was like, all right, here's the little quick turnaround. This way, when I'm playing, I'm like, you know, you can do like those things where you see in the cartoon where like, oh, he's driving as a car, and then bam, he's in midair, and boom, now all of a sudden he's a robot.
Yeah. Charlie, you had something to add?
I was just saying, like the old McDonald's, you know, remember the food changeables?
Yes. I had.
I have a few of those still.
I think I had that whole collection too. I remember that. It wasn't necessarily like a Transformers branded toy, but I do remember that it had like that kind of style. If you guys remember the those McDonald toys that transform, like the hamburger, you know, it turns like a little robot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I remember the
I had
fries.
those too.
Yeah. Wow, that really brought me back.
Yeah, now I'm just hoping McDonald's doesn't have any ideas for a movie. Yeah, Mac and Me was bad enough.
Yeah. You know, I do have to say, the Transformer toys were amazing for one particular reason for me. It's like you could sit there and appreciate that it's perfectly fine for your submarine to go up against a whale, and then for both of them to turn into robots and to duke it out. And me, as a child, that was like everything to me. That was mind blowing. I was like, you know, I'm pretty sure just having a submarine figure that did nothing but was just a submarine and a whale, it wouldn't be nearly as fun as the fact that they're both able to transform and duke it out.
And then, like, back in the day, these things were made with metal, die-cast.
Yeah, that's right. That was like the unique thing about it. All of our toys were mostly plastic, but this was like a die metal cast.
The die
type.
cast,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, those were great. Man,
Like,
it had some weight to them too.
I have,
Yeah, they're definitely heavier.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Charlie.
You know, I have Predacons that use all the Predacons combined.
Hmm.
And there's actually two versions. There's the metal version and the plastic, and I, of course, I think it's the metal one. And that thing weighs a ton. It's like a brick. Especially like when it's combined.
Yeah, I can imagine so.
Oh yeah, you didn't weigh that much, you know.
Yeah, you know, like I said, I wasn't a big collector when I was a kid because, I mean, just like Albert, I was more into just action figures of that period, whether it was Ghostbusters, Batman, G.I. Joe. But my cousin was a huge Transformers fan, so he was kind of like the first guy to sort of get me into it to a degree. Because he had a Prime, he had Jazz, he had Ratchet, he had the Autobot version of Soundwave. If you guys remember his name.
Blaster.
Yeah. he had Blaster, and that was like one of the coolest figures that I had seen before I even knew that Soundwave existed, just because the tapes came out of him. And yeah, I think because of that and because of Legos, like he was really big into toys that kind of like built themselves into something much bigger or just transform themselves from one thing to the next. So I think he was always into like that kind of scientific way of a way that a toy could work versus just the standard like, okay, here's the guy, here's the accessories, go out and do what you want with him. Whereas Transformers, it was just so complex and delicate with each figure, and especially later on when you started doing things like Devastator and what was it, like the Pretenders and other toys where you like had to like pick them apart, build them together, into one gigantic robot. I think that was also something that smaller kids were really like excited to be into than the slightly older kids that were more skewed towards the GI Joes and so forth.
You're absolutely right about that. I thought that's what was most unique about the Transformers toy line. That the fact that it was exercise for your brain. It was pretty much every single type of vehicle that they could conjure up or animal transforming into a robot, and the whole sequence and everything. It's like having a Rubik's Cube, except all different volumes of them,
Right.
And I thought that was amazing, especially for kids, especially for me. It kept, it kept your mind working more efficiently than just having just plain old action figures. Not that I'm shitting on action figures. I loved all of them. I had my Captain America versus Hulk Hogan, and then Optimus Prime would come in as a ref. It was great. It was a good time.
Before you say that, it's like a puzzle because there's actually Thomas. I'm sure you remember there's a Transformer called Stick Shot, and on the box it even says like the ultimate Transformer like puzzle or something. It's like there's just 6 things in one, like a robot, a lion, a jet, a gun, a tank, and a car or something.
The multi-form ones, they were the hardest, man.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever owned one that could do that. I think the closest I've had to that was Optimus Prime turning from his robot form to the truck, and then combining his trailer onto his body. But I remember the specific toys, they would transform into several things, and I just never had the opportunity to get my hands on them.
That's actually the Power Master Prime.
Nice. Oh man, missed out on that.
Yeah, so let's get into the 1986 Transformers the movie. So we were 2 years in with the toy line and the cartoon. So toy line came out in 1984. The cartoon came out right around the same time that fall in syndication. You also had the Marvel comic. So Hasbro pretty much had this whole entire tie-in with the Transformers line. And we also, let's not forget, too, that they were competing against Tonka with the GoBots. And I always thought the GoBot artwork on the toy line packaging themselves, the artwork was incredible. But the cartoon that Hanna-Barbera did was not so impressive. And then they tried to do that War of the Rock Lords movie that came out earlier in that year before Transformers the movie. And that was designed to introduce the Rock Lords toy line. And I think my cousin had a couple of those figures because you had like the jet and the cop car and all those things. But yeah, I mean, that was really more like for preschool kids. It really wasn't all that complex. And not surprising that years later Hasbro would buy out Tonka and sort of integrate at least a GoBot name into Transformers. So the least said about that, the better. This was produced by Marvel when they had an animation division long before they would make billions with the live action division. And this was a big event if you were a Transformers fan as a kid, because it was a 90-minute film. of seeing those characters on the silver screen. You have a number of big name celebrities of the time, like Leonard Nimoy, Judd Nelson. You had Orson Welles playing the voice of probably the most powerful Transformer of all, Unicron. And, this was promoted to be a big deal. If you were a kid back then and you saw those commercials, you wanted to run out and see it. But let's also not forget this was the 1980s, so movies of that kind of caliber, especially like animation in general, even for Disney at that time before they started to really improve their storytelling and their animation department, animation films were strictly for kids. So they weren't always going to get the best reviews from the critics. They were always going to be dumbed down and simplified for the kids to understand what was going on. And in this case, it was basically a 90-minute commercial for the third wave of figures that were coming out at that time. And surprisingly enough, not only did the movie not succeed financially at the box office, but there was a massive backlash because of the fact that as an hour and a half advertisement for the new figures, they decided, well, we're not going to be producing that first wave of toys with Optimus Prime and Bumblebee and the rest of the gang and Megatron. So we're actually going to wipe them out. We're going to alter them, and we're going to have a whole bunch of new toys for kids to buy. And Hasbro didn't quite understand that, kids in America who were so in love with Optimus Prime didn't want to see him go. And yet it later on, as those kids became older, they went from complaining to their parents about, why did they kill Optimus Prime? Why do we end up with this hot rod guy? To now really appreciating the boldness of that storyline. So what do you guys remember about the movie?
First and foremost, I can tell you one thing. Tom Melendez knows every word to that movie. I've seen him I actually witnessed him from start to close to the middle of the movie, just go straight through it without even watching the damn thing. So if anybody knows a lot about it, it's Tom.
It's like it's being projected behind my eyeballs, or as Megatron would call them, optic sensors. So, it's a fantastic movie. It had heart. To see Optimus die like that was like it shattered my heart as a child. But I didn't fight it as much as most kids did. There, like you were saying, Andre, there was a lot of backlash. But at the time, I remember I was very accepting of it. I was like, wow, the Optimus is gone. What's going to happen now? And to see Rodimus Prime, this immature young Autobot, take on the mantle of being a Prime, inheriting the name, because he went from, Hot Rod to Rodimus Prime. And he was even bigger and everything like that once he took on the mantle. And it looked like he even aged just like 20 years between him picking up the matrix of leadership and actually becoming a Prime. He looked much more mature in the movie. It was pretty good how they did that. But I was pretty accepting of it. I thought it was a great movie, and it opened up a whole new world of possibilities, I thought it was excellent, which I memorized every word to it.
Plus, it has Grimlock in it.
Oh, yeah. You can't have an Autobot movie. I mean, you can't have the Transformers movie without, that.
Dinobots, baby.
Oh, yeah. Too bad they don't combine, huh? They'd be a force to be reckoned with.
Oh, hell yeah.
I know.
It's funny, like, when
It's
I
a
was
shame.
kid, I always thought, like, the Dinobots, because I didn't have the Dinobots when I was a little kid. I had them later on. But I always thought they were going to be, like, so much bigger as toys.
Yeah, I thought so, too.
Yeah. One thing. Oh, no, go ahead.
Like 2 feet tall or something.
Yeah, he was like the size of, no different from like Bumblebee.
No, he's like Prime size in a way. Like,
Yeah, that was my only real beef with the toy line.
Right.
Like two original toys. So like I always thought in my head, they were going to be huge.
Yeah, and I think this actually kind of jumps into the toy line as well. So in that third wave, we were getting pretty much most of the characters that were introduced in the movie that had not been in the cartoon yet were basically all featured, and Hasbro really rolled them all out. So we got Hot Rod, we got Cup, who was like the veteran Autobot introduced in the movie. Um, Obviously, at the end of the film, Hot Rod becomes Rodimus Prime when he opens up the Matrix. So we get a Rodimus Prime toy with the hatchback and the basically like a taller look than the normal Hot Rod figure. Uh, of course, Megatron, who's like basically beaten to shit. He turns into Galvatron in the movie, so we get a Galvatron toy and his minions, so Cyclonus and Scourge. And we also got an Ultra Magnus toy, and that was like also probably one of the biggest size Transformer figures up until that point. And in a way was sort of a red herring in the way that they promoted the movie, as if he was going to be the new Optimus Prime, and clearly he's not. So that was like a nice little twist to make it seem like that. And then, for Hot Rod to become that new star, it was basically they were trying to do Star Wars with this movie. It was an animated Star Wars Transformers movie where you had like the reluctant hero rise above all obstacles, and the big threat, of course, being Unicron, who's like a big sized planet that transforms into a big sized transformer. He's essentially the Death Star. So I think that was definitely what Hasbro and Marvel were trying to achieve with the movie.
Yeah, yeah, more or less, that's exactly what they were trying to do. And I mean, it was a good strategy. Why not hop on that success train of Star Wars? I don't blame them for doing it.
I also remember too, like Hot Rod, was kind of one of the coolest looking Transformer toys of that time, and I know my cousin really wanted him, and of course because finances and the expense of the toys, because I think the prices went up with each new set. It was hard to kind of get him, and I remember this was back in the mid '90s, and there used to be this. Like a sports memorabilia store that was also selling wrestling figures. So that's where I would get like all my Hasbro and LJN toys from, like at least the rare ones. And this guy had like like a whole glass case full of Transformer figures. And my cousin came with me one day. He went ape shit looking at all this stuff, and he saw the Hot Rod. He really wanted to buy it, but it was like 50 something dollars out of the box, and there was just no way that was going to happen.
That's a shame, man.
Yeah.
They're up there now, man. The prices they keep going up.
Yeah, I mean, just
Charlie, you're really. I mean, you have the biggest collection of Transformer toys that I know. Yeah, I mean, are you buying them now, or are most of the ones that you had from when you were a kid?
All the ones in the box are definitely ones I've gotten off eBay, but some of the loose ones I've had as a kid, but like I said, the ones in the boxes, definitely off eBay. Or like Comic Con, something like that in the city.
Right.
And what's the markup on eBay on those? Are they really expensive, or like is there still a really big, a lot of people that are still really collecting them now?
Yeah, people still buy them, man. They're still up there. I mean, but it ranges. I mean, sometimes you'll get like, you'll see something that they'll not listed as a Transformer, and it'll be like way underpriced, and that's when you swoop in and get that. Meanwhile, it's like really $200, $300, and you just got it for like $150.
Wow,
man. Oh, and I wanted to say back to the comment you made about the size, the scaling size of the action figures. That was, to be honest with you, to me that was their only flaw, that they didn't really pay attention to the scale of the size, because it was a big deal to me to have some of these Autobots that were clearly bigger, like you had or the Decepticons as well, one figure I always wanted to get, I don't even know if he exists, is Astro Train. There's a Decepticon that can turn into a space shuttle and a train. And he's massive. He can. Do they have an action figure of that, Charles?
Yes, I actually have it. I'm holding it right now because I had it on my table the other day. And my girlfriend said, "What's this?" I'm like, "That's Astro Train."
Oh man. So what's the scaling size of him? Is he that much bigger? Can you put Autobots and Decepticons inside of him?
No, he's small. He's like Autobot car size kind of.
Yeah, see, that was my only beef with the toy series. That, and I get it, you got to keep the prices fair, but, make them at least a little bit bigger. Maybe you could throw in one Autobot in there or one Decepticon, something. But
well, see, this goes back to something that Andre and I have been talking about the past couple of weeks on this show. A lot of these toy companies, I don't think they realized what they had when it came to like their fan base. So scaling was always a big deal for a lot of people. For me personally, I hated having I grew up as a big wrestling fan, so I hated having a guy who was supposed to be 7 foot tall, the same size as somebody who's supposed to be like 5'5".
Mm-hmm.
That would always get me angry. And we realized, Andre and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago with the size of the Batman figures, how Bane was the same size as Batman. And it's like, he's supposed to be big and intimidating, and but they're the same size. So, I definitely understand what you guys are talking about when it comes to the scale of these guys, because we have, Autobots and Decepticons who are depicted on screen as completely different sizes, and then you get the toys, and they're the exact same size.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always thought it was unfair that Megatron was a toy, and you couldn't interact with him when he turned into a gun. I mean, how it wasn't even physically possible. You can't transform an action figure the same size as Starscream and have him transform to fit in the hand of Starscream. Just never made sense.
Yeah.
But that's not the toy line's problem, or that's not their fault, rather. But it was just funny how the scaling was just a little difficult. But if they paid a little more attention, it probably would have been better off. But what can you do?
Yeah, and that's the difference between toy lines like Transformers and, let's just say, Masters of the Universe, where He-Man started off as a toy line and then became a TV series. So it was easy for you to emulate. You were basically basing the TV series on the toy line. With Transformers, you were basing the toy line on what was on the screen. And sometimes when you didn't pay enough attention, that's where it led to stuff like, scaling issues.
Well, I mean, speaking of size and scaling, that leads me to the prototype of Unicron, for the original Generation 1 toy line. So, he wasn't just thrown into the movie just as a major threat. He was supposed to be probably the biggest Transformer toy that Hasbro had conceived up until that time. And the plan was, it was basically it was going to be like a big planet with the yellow barrier around him, and it was going to be like 1 foot tall, colored in blue and yellow, and it was also going to have a voice chip, so you could actually speak through the toy, like literally, like the way you have like those voice changer masks. It would have been just like that, where you could have been that person.
I think he's actually going to be 2 feet tall.
2 feet tall, yeah. I mean, either way, that's just insanity. But, the fact that it was going to be as big, it just, I guess in terms of the testing stage, they realized this was just too flimsy, too hard to put together as a whole Transformer. So it never made it to the shelf. Not until 2003 when they did eventually make like a far better version than the original prototype. I think it was part of the Armada line, and it wound up getting like an award for a toy of the year by I think Toy Fair magazine or one of the other publications. So it took a long time to get to him, and the new figure was so much more impressive than what we probably would have ended up with back then.
Oh, I saw pictures of it. It looked ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was so corny looking. It looked like, what it looked like? It looked like a GoBot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like a cross between a GoBot and Dr. Robotnik.
Yeah.
Dr. Gobotnik.
Dr. Go-
But they actually made another version of him, like the Masterpiece line. They released that same figure, the Armada, but they made him movie accurate. They made like the paint scheme exactly like how he looks at the planet.
Yes.
Which is actually pretty cool looking.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at it now. That's actually like 10 times better than what we would have ended up getting.
Yeah, I just pulled up just now too. That is 10 times better. What they should have did was that they should have marketed almost like you could put like a Unicron mask with the voice changing. Maybe have like plastic gloves to go over your hands, so you can imitate him smashing through Cybertron with that big first hit in the movie. Maybe like a little suit thing, nothing to cover the whole body, but you are Unicron. It would be logical in a sense because you can put on Unicron's glove and grab Optimus Prime, like if you are Unicron. I think they should have marketed it that way the first time around.
I would actually love to see some cosplay of that.
Oh yeah.
There's a band. Oh man, what is their name? Cybertronics 3, I think. And they all dress.
What are they called?
As I think Cybertronics 3.
Nice.
They're on Instagram. I follow them. It's pretty funny. They all dress up as characters. And Unicron, I think, is the bass player.
And Tom's became a fan of the band.
I gotta see what's going on here. That's gotta be pretty interesting.
Yeah, and one other. Go ahead, Charlie.
I think they cover like all the movie, like songs in the original movie.
Oh, so you do. You got the touch and
yes,
yeah.
Yeah, Stan Bush is there.
Nothing's gonna stand in our way.
What was the other one? I think there's a song. It's called Nizzle Tizzle. When they were escaping the planet.
Oh,
it's like an instrumental.
Yeah, there's a couple good instrumentals in there, as I recall, and also Weird Al's "Dare to Be Stupid."
Oh yeah.
I think the instrumentals were Vince DiCola, I think.
Yes, Vince DiCola, who scored Rocky IV. I still have some of those.
The soundtrack to that movie always just didn't seem like it fit. Like they just threw a couple of songs in there because they felt like it, but it was great.
It did actually. It worked in the end, I thought.
Yeah, I mean,
I loved it.
It was totally 80s. I still have some of those songs on my iPod when I'm working out. I mean, it really just it gets you into like this kick-ass kind of mood, and you start actually believing yourself as a Transformer, when you're listening to those tracks.
Oh yeah, I remember the last time. Wow, Charlie.
I think Charlie was trying to sing.
Oh yeah.
The moment's over.
Oh. I missed it, just like I missed most of the action figures.
So one other thing I also want to mention about this movie is this was also the first movie where we had a female Transformer in the form of Arcee, and apparently the writers of the movie had to fight with Hasbro to put this character in it. But we never got a toy. Now, apparently, as I found out doing research for this episode, that there was concept art for an Arcee figure that never got past the artwork phase. So it's only been seen in a couple of Japanese publications. And, I mean, obviously there'll be versions of it in later lines, but at that time for Generation 1, it was like one of the few figures that we never got from that movie, or even the regular animated series.
That's a shame. Definitely a shame that happened. And I didn't mind Arcee. Hey, the female Autobot, the more the merrier. Why not, right? I thought there was going to be a love story there now. Once I saw that, but they didn't go that route, which is fine either way. But
I think it was better that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have respect for Arcee as a character after reading the comic books, oh my god, she is insane. She's like a bipolar, very violent assassin.
Hmm.
It's crazy. I love her character in the comic books. Actually, I want to see more Arcee because of her comic book character. And I mean, they pretty much would go to her to hire her. She was a hitman or a hit woman, I guess. You know, she's pretty cool, and she has a flame sword and everything like that. Now, if they made an action figure of that, I'm running to Toys R Us or Toys R Us. I guess I'll go on Amazon.
It's kind of funny, like Arcee. You were saying earlier, like it's kind of like Star Wars, the movies, like you're like a hero rising from the ashes. But like Arcee, you can tell like she's very inspired by Leia.
Oh, totally.
Oh yeah, even the hair.
It's like the buns.
Yeah, the buns on the side of her head. Yeah, that's a good catch. I never noticed that until now.
Yeah, I'm also looking now that there were these line of PVC figures that Takara put out. That's like the Japanese Hasbro, and they actually have not only like a super accurate looking Arcee, but they also have an accurate looking Daniel Witwicky toy in that little spacesuit that he wears.
Yeah.
Oh really?
Yeah, I mean, dead on, just like from the movie. And, we obviously, with that line, we never really got the human toys, except when they did the Headmasters. And I think there was a Spike Witwicky toy, like in a little Transformer suit. But that's as close as we got up until, we got like a Sam Witwicky toy in the movies.
Yeah, that's pretty wild, actually. I never seen that. Or even thought to collect a toy of Sam Witwicky. So I'm looking it up right now. That came after Headmasters, you said, huh?
Yeah, I forget which figure it came with, but it was definitely during the Headmasters line, and I saw like one of them was supposed to be Spike Witwicky.
Mm. Wow, yeah, look at that. The Headmaster toys were definitely a little different. That was past my era,
Yeah.
Probably a big choking hazard to other kids too, God forbid.
I was actually pissed.
When it came apart. Well, Charles?
I went to a horror convention with my dad and my uncle, and they had this Headmaster Transformer Horror Bowl. I was so happy to get this toy, and then we got in the car, and I finally take it out and looking at it, and I'm like, where's its head? And there is no head because it wasn't with it.
That sucks.
I was very upset.
Oh man.
I still have it, but he actually goes for a lot of money. So I won't be buying anything.
Yeah, would you be able to get the head separate on eBay?
I could, but the figure itself I have now kind of got broken.
Oh.
Oh, so it's not still in a package, huh? Yeah, because when you removed it, oh man, that would have been great as still being packaged.
Yeah.
Could have been worth something. And did that, I did like, what I also like about Transformers is that through the years they made these connections with other companies within Hasbro. It's like you walk into a Kmart and see a couple of the toys on the shelves, and suddenly you see a Decepticon that would turn into a TIE fighter, and that blew me away. I was like, wow, this is amazing, and I didn't think anything would surprise me after seeing Beast Wars. When Beast Wars came out, that was like a whole different animal right there, no pun intended. It was something else, man. They really had a large variety of transformations and characters too.
Yeah, there have been all kinds of different Transformers, like a Transformer Star Trek Enterprise. We've seen it recently with the Ecto-1 turning into a Transformer.
Mm-hmm.
I even read that Hasbro, back during the Generation 1 era, was planning to do a series of like monster movie monsters that would turn into Transformers, and I guess they never quite figured out a storyline for that, but that was supposedly like a one that turned into like a Dracula, one that turned into like the creature from the Black Lagoon, and there's some artwork of the Dracula version of it, but again, it never really got past the artwork phase.
Well, you guys remember, I'm kind of straying out Transformers for a second, but it is Transformer related.
Yeah.
Do you remember the Ninja Turtles back in the day had those Ninja Turtles that transform from like a baby turtle into the adult turtle?
Yes.
It's basically like you
I don't.
the shell, you tuck the arms in.
Yeah, I think I may
Really?
have had one of those. I'm either a Leonardo or a Donatello, but I do remember that they had like those turtles that they would like be little baby-sized turtles, and then they could transform themselves into like an adult-looking turtle, but it would be very Transformer-like.
Huh. I don't think I ever. I don't remember that. Wow.
Yeah, neither do I.
It may have been like at the point when the line was starting to phase out, like maybe when it started, people were just getting tired of it and moving on to like the X-Men figures and so forth, and Batman.
No.
Even I think Punisher. They made a Punisher that transforms into a gun or something.
I think I remember seeing that in the store too. There were a few of those, like the Marvels type ones.
What did they turn into?
There was like a Punisher that turned into a gun, and wasn't there like a Spider-Man that turned to like an actual spider?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty wild. Definitely gotta look that up right now.
Yeah, everybody wanted a piece of Transformers.
Yeah, so let's jump ahead 2 decades later with the first Transformers movie by Michael Bay. So, just kind of like make a long story short with the rest of the line. So, like I said, the animated movie would go on to become a classic on home video. We would get one more season of the original Marvel cartoon before it ceased production. And then the toy line, like any other toy line, eventually kind of petered out. Hasbro made many attempts to bring it back. There was Generation 2 back in the 90s. There was Beast Wars. And a number of other lines before finally, Steven Spielberg decided he wanted to produce a Transformers film, hired Michael Bay to do it. And, it was this big event. And a lot of fans were writing letters to the film's producers to really ensure that they would get it right, that they would get the characters accurate to the toy line and the cartoon as they remembered it. But of course, because once Michael Bay came on board, Michael Bay was going to do what he wanted to do because obviously he's the biggest commercial director there is. And he wasn't a fan of those original blocky looking designs that we all grew up on. So he wanted more of like a Gundam influence type design for each character. And the fans backlashed in the beginning. Optimus with the flames. Bumblebee can't talk unless he has the radio. Megatron's total look completely changed because we can't have him be a gun and turn into a Decepticon. So we'll make him a tank. Yeah, just like in...
Megatron looks like Godzilla from the 97 movie.
Yeah, he looked like Godzilla from the 97 movie. And... they made him a tank instead of a gun, even though it had already been done in Generation 2. But yeah, I mean, I gotta say, when the film came out, I was hyped up no matter what, because it was just, I thought, a big event to see those characters on the big screen in live action. And of course, we had to wait, 2 hours before we got, actual Autobot Decepticon fights, before the big third act. But yeah, I mean, it was at the time I thought this was amazing. This was like smashing over every other movie that was out that year, and it had kind of that Spielberg type of feel of the boy in his first car, and it expands into this big adventure. But yeah, I mean, not every fan was a big fan of the movie because of all the changes. I mean, yes, they got the original voice of Prime, Peter Cullen, back, but they weren't happy with Hugo Weaving replacing Frank Welker as Megatron. But otherwise, it was an impressive first effort, in spite of those changes.
Yeah, they shied away from a good amount of source material. And I think that was a big problem, like you said, to a lot of the fans. But I could stomach the first movie. This first movie wasn't terrible. It was pretty good. The storyline was there. You had Sam Witwicky. He was there. He had a bigger part than I would have wanted, to be honest with you. But it wasn't so bad.
And even like the small changes that Andre even brought up, like I didn't mind the fact that Bumblebee, like talked through the radio. I thought that was invented. Like I thought that was kind of cool. I know that a lot of fans want the source material and they almost want a remake of what they see as a kid. But if it's the same thing, you're just going to complain that they didn't do anything original enough. So it's a tough situation. And the first movie wasn't bad. I actually enjoyed it, and I was like, okay, if this is going to be the franchise from here on out, I'm not too mad about this.
Yeah. Charlie, what were your thoughts when you first saw it, or if you did see it?
I was definitely excited for the movie, but the main thing I loved was Peter Cullen back as the voice of Optimus, because I think, in my opinion, made that movie. Without him, you can't have Optimus.
Right. I remember in the commentary track that Michael Bay said originally they were considering Liam Neeson for Prime, and they were going to get Michael J. Fox to do the voice of Bumblebee.
I'm just like that. I mean, I would have liked Michael J. Fox as Bumblebee.
Yeah, no, it would have been a good tie-in with Back to the Future, to, like sort of that throwback. But yeah, I mean, as great as Liam Neeson is, I mean, that Optimus Prime voice by Peter Cullen, it is so much a trademark. Yes, it's a legend and a trademark of who he is. You can't imagine anybody else do it.
Absolutely,
I agree.
Absolutely,
He sounds even more like older and wiser.
Yeah, totally. I mean, he is that quintessential leader of the team. So he definitely, I think he transcended from the simplicity of the cartoon to something that felt more seasoned in each film.
And like the only thing that really bugged me was where was his faceplate? He didn't have a mouth.
Right. There were like a lot of little things that I kind of nitpicked about. I was pissed that they killed off Jazz because he was like one of my favorite Transformers growing up. It's like, why you got to kill the black Autobot? Seriously, of all things.
That was the unfortunate trend I started noticing throughout the movies. That it wasn't a very popular trend. There was I remember seeing some talk about that online, like, why'd you have to kill the one black Autobot? He clearly was, but, and then part two, I'm not even gonna get into it.
We're gonna get into it, Tom.
You know what? Then I'll just say, why are you gonna have two little Autobots who all they did was bicker at one another? I guess they were brothers. I don't even remember their names. They had these big gold teeth, and they said they couldn't read, and they remind me of Flavor Flav, and it was terrible. No?
Skids and Mudflap.
Oh yeah, Skids and Mudflap.
Yes, Skids and Mudflap. Come on, they couldn't read. It was like a slap in the face.
Yeah, it was really, really racist.
Yeah, came off as very racist. And what's the rule of thumb when it comes to movies? If the first person to die is a black person, then it's a horror movie, right? So does that mean the first Transformers was a horror movie? Like, come on.
Maybe.
Well, yeah, that would become the ultimate issue with each film, particularly with Revenge of the Fallen, which was the second movie. Because I remember after the first one came out, I loved it so much, I said, I'm willing to wait at least 3-4 years for them to make the next one, just so that they could get it right. We got it in 2, surprisingly enough, but there was a writer's strike that happened when the film was in production, so a lot of what was in that second movie was basically a rush job. You had things like Shia LaBeouf injuring his hand. They had to kind of write that into the film. They listened to the fans in terms of jamming in a lot of new characters. We got Arcee, we got Devastator, we got we got Wheelie in the film, right?
Yeah,
he came in the second one, right?
I couldn't tell who was who sometimes.
That was the big problem. there were too many characters and so many that would get killed off. You didn't know who was getting killed off half the time. And Michael Bay, I mean, again, you talk about Skids and Mudflap being like, you know, the stereotypical black Autobots, but the writing alone was just atrocious in that film. The jokes
Was
were just,
terrible.
yeah, they were terrible.
Yeah.
The scene with Shia LaBeouf's mom eating like the ganja cake went way too long, and the way Devastator got taken down was fucking ridiculous. And the whole bit was like, oh, he's got testicles, you know.
He didn't need nuts.
Yeah, like this was. Did they have like fourth graders writing this? Because this was not the Transformers we were expecting, and everything with Megan Fox was literally like a freaking Victoria's Secret ad.
Oh God. Oh, it was terrible. Was that the one with the humanoid, the Decepticon that was trying to seduce
Yes.
Wiki?
Was that 2 or 3?
That was the second one.
Was that?
This was the second Transformers movie.
It was just plain bad.
Like, no, I do understand some of the fight scenes that you lose your spot in what's going on. I totally get it, because at the end of the day, we are who we are, and if you see two guys fighting on the screen, it's going to be easier to translate to the audience than two robots, because you're going to see like a kneecap, but that's a Cybertronian kneecap. I don't know what that looks like. It's not the most familiar thing to me, you know? Sometimes I'll read the Transformer comics and I'll have to stare at a picture for a moment to say, oh, that's his back. You know, I get that. It's a little difficult, but they made all the Decepticons look so similar. Dark, sharp, red eyes.
I was actually just going to say that. Like, they're all like this silver colored, and you really can't make out any features, just eyes. And like weird mouth.
And I think what makes it tougher if you were like a fan of Generation 1 is because of the fact that obviously they were based on 80s cars back then, and the fact that General Motors was like the big sponsor of the movie and they supplied the vehicles. Sometimes it was always confusing when they would change different designs to fit today's times, and that's where sometimes you would get lost with who was who half the time. Like turning Arcee from like this little space car into a motorcycle, you know, and again, you wouldn't know who was who.
Remember what they did with Wheeljack?
Yeah, we.
Didn't they make him like an Albert Einstein kind of character with like hair and glasses?
Yeah, that was in the third movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And which movie was that?
My favorite Autobot.
The third one.
Yeah,
Man, it must have just been such a terrible scene that I blocked it in my mind, like I'm scarred.
Well, I remember I went to go see the third movie with you, Tom, and I remember us walking out of the theater going, well, at least the fight scenes were cool, because the rest of the movie sucked.
It was terrible. Andre, what was the one that me and you saw? The most recent one was
The Last
that's
Night.
the one. The Last Night.
Yeah, and you paid for my ticket, so I didn't have to torture myself financially.
You know, I did that to you as a favor, but at one point in the movie, I remember saying to myself, you know, I'm a little hungry. I exited the theater. I told you, I'll be right back. I'm going to get something to eat.
Mm-hmm.
I walked down a block. I went to the pizzeria. I ordered 2 slices. I sat down, had my pizza, had my soda, went back to the movie. I was not enjoying that movie. If I could clearly just go and have lunch and then return back to my seat and say, all right, I guess I'm back to where I am, because this movie's not making any sense.
Yeah, I mean,
it was so hard to follow.
You know, I mean, I guess without really getting so heavily on each particular movie, I do think that with each film, you know, like I do think Dark of the Moon, the third film, was an improvement over Revenge of the Fallen, but not by much. And I just think that the more that Michael Bay was just injecting his own sensibility of, oh, I'm just making movies for teenage boys, so that's why, you know, we're going to have all this dorky millennial humor and all these sexy women walking around, you know, at the end of the day, you're still trying to sell the toys. And, you know, even while you had different versions of Prime, different versions of Bumblebee, and all the new characters they would introduce. Even at one point, they had the human figures, so if you wanted a Shia LaBeouf or a Megan Fox or even a Tyrese figure, you could get that. But it just started getting dumber and less substantial as the cartoon was. The cartoon was very complex in its own way if you looked at it um, as a writer, just the relationships among the characters and just again, it's the Autobots and Decepticons interacted with each other. We have these human characters that these producers are thinking that's who the audience is supposed to relate to. I'm sorry, you can't sympathize with anybody because they're just so fucking dumb. And this director in Michael
Yeah,
Bay,
absolutely.
I love the Bad Boys movies, I love The Rock, but watching not Revenge, The Last Night, it was just torture to see Anthony Hopkins goof off. It was torture to see Mark Wahlberg be Mark Wahlberg, or even to take Hot Rod and make him a French speaking hot rod vehicle.
He
This guy,
started stopping time or something. What?
it was like, and that's the thing, they're trying, like, every movie feels like a reboot because it's like, oh, we're going to tie in the Autobots and Decepticons past to the Egyptian pyramids or the moon landing or the dinosaur age, so we could bring in the Dinobots, or the last movie was
Merlin.
supposedly King Arthur's sword.
Merlin the Wizard.
Right, yeah, Merlin
Yeah.
the Wizard. It just, I felt like the right,
It is, Andre?
yeah,
I feel like the thing with King Arthur's sword is that the original cartoons, I feel like he's trying to. There is an episode where they go in like King Arthur's court.
Mhm.
I think in like season 2, it's like I think it's like Hoist, Starscream, Warpath, and like Astro Train or something. But it's like I think he takes some of like the minute little ideas from the cartoon, like the ones that you want to forget about, and puts them in the movie like King Arthur's court or something.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, they say that at least one of the writers is like a big Transformers fan, so he's always trying to inject stuff from the cartoon as well as even the Marvel comics. But once you see the movie, it's like once it has Michael Bay's touch on it, it just becomes his thing. And I feel like Spielberg has taken such a step back as a producer. Like, go ahead, I'll just sign the check, you do whatever you want. And then these films just get dumber, and you have a guy that really doesn't understand what made those characters work. He's just into, let's throw in the military, make the military look great. Let's have, Autobots fighting like different types of action sequences, but nothing all that impressive. Nothing to the degree of the greatness of that animated film.
I think South Park displayed Michael Bay's abilities on point.
Yep.
Oh, we're talking about like that
Yeah,
the episode when he's
What?
like pitching how to save South Park, or they're like, no, that's not whatever it is. That's a special effect.
Yeah, you should boom.
I did.
Oh, it's so good.
I did like the Dinobots. They were big. They were mean. What's his name? Oh my God, Charlie, you know his name. The Pterodon or the Pterodactyl, Scoop.
Scoop, yeah. What's
Yeah,
funny
Scoop.
actually is the Triceratops flag. I think they changed the name to Slug because flag is like apparently a curse word now.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a shame. But at least they gave Scoop 2 heads and 2 tails. I thought that was cool. It was unique.
I thought it was pretty cool. The Dinobots
Yeah.
weren't that bad. I mean, but I think there was like a Spinosaurus or something and like a little raptor or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was a Spinosaurus. Yeah, instead of the Brontosaurus, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. Blood was missing.
But didn't they turn into babies at one point? The following movie somehow. I don't know how that happened.
They did something stupid.
I don't even know. I think something on like one of the sites I follow is like one of the figures that comes out now comes with like a baby flag and a baby Grimlock. I'm like, what the hell is this?
And then And then Unicron was in the last movie somehow.
Oh.
I didn't even know.
That dumb idea that Unicron is planet Earth the whole time. That's like the biggest bullshit letdown, for what.
Oh,
I thought the plan originally was that Unicron was going to be built up into the third movie, so it would be a trilogy, and Unicron would be the threat in the third film instead of Sentinel Prime. It seemed like they were just shying away from that for the longest time, and then finally they decided, oh well, we'll just have his little horn sticking out from the desert. It was just such bullshit, and it just obviously now they knew to reboot it with Bumblebee to like completely erase all that shit, because clearly where they were going was not working.
I really did want to see Bumblebee also, but I was just too scarred. I couldn't muster the strength to see it. I just didn't want to get disappointed again. It's like you're dating a girl and you always break up and get back with her. You know it's going to end up in flames over and over again, so you're hesitant to try to give another shot. And when Bumblebee came out, it looked fantastic. It looked like something we had been waiting for, or at least me personally. But I just couldn't muster the strength to go see it.
Well, yeah.
Did you see it, Charlie?
No, I did not see it, but I heard it was good. But again, I heard, I had to, like the whole beginning, I see like on like Cybertron, and that kind of looks like, more for Cybertron, that game. But at least like the characters look like you can make out who they actually are. They're not all the same color, and here's like Soundwave looks like Soundwave. The Optimus looks like Optimus.
Yeah.
Shockwave looks like Shockwave.
Yeah, once they gave Optimus Prime lips, I was not having it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want him to look like a surgeon walking into a room, like with the whole mask over his mouth. I don't want to see Optimus Prime's lips. For what?
The saddest thing for me was that, throughout all the entirety of these movies, I remember thinking to myself, I don't remember the toy line. Like, I don't remember going to the store and seeing anything that was at least anything of substance throughout the entire toy line. And I know that now we're starting to build back up and nostalgia's starting to kick in. And a lot of these other companies are now making toys that are really more for adult collectors like us. I believe, Andre, you posted earlier on the Facebook of podcast about the new Optimus Prime that's coming out, and that looks great.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the toy line for these at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could just like pass by any shelf these days in a Target or a Walmart. It's like nothing really stands out. I mean, I think the designs are just they're so like overdone that they don't pop to your eye the way that the original toys did. If you saw like a specific car or just the die-cast look of like a Prime or Jazz or a Megatron or even a Starscream, you want to get those figures. Even like the coloring of the box, when you see like the red for Autobot, the purple for the Decepticon, that stuff attracted you. But now everything is so much the same and overdone, it's not even like worth collecting. And even though I have like my friends whose kids were collectors when the first movie came out, I never really saw the appeal all that much.
I agree. Packaging is a huge deal too. I feel like that's something that's a lost art that a lot of other people, that some companies are now starting to realize that it's a big deal. I'm not a mint on card collector or a mint in box collector for the most part, unless the packaging is so good that I don't want to I don't want to open the figures up. Recently, the one that caught my eye the most is, this is a little bit off topic, but Mattel came out with the WWE Retro Fest figures, and they look like they're inside of a video game console. And to me, that's cool. I have, the first 3 of those set. I'm going to get them all. I'm never taking them out of the box. But that's the thing. Packaging for kids, when we were younger, was a big deal. And Andre, you're right. You see those packages on the shelves. You want to get those things. There's nothing like that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least maybe it's the whole Tricks effect, being that we're adults, We look at Tricks now and all you see is full little poofs of cereal. But kids, apparently, they still see the shapes of the fruit, just like we did when we were young. So maybe that's what's happening to us.
And I also want to bring back something that Charlie said. Charlie, you were talking about like when you would buy the toys and they would have like the little catalogs that showed like the entire set of figures from that particular wave. But that was another thing that also made me want to buy the toys was like, say, like, for example, with G.I. Joe, they would have like the picture display of seeing like the Joes and the Cobras fighting each other on some like makeshift background and playset that you really couldn't buy, but just seeing that in action, you totally want to get those figures because it's like I want to do that in my backyard, And Transformers had that exact same thing, to see like the Autobots and Decepticons displayed in almost like an action-like setup that you wanted to get those figures. You don't have that now unless you see like the prototype pictures at Toy Fair. You don't see like those kind of catalogs when you buy Star Wars figures or when you're buying Transformers or even Marvel stuff.
Yeah, no, like the old catalog, I love getting those. I don't even know how I remember it still, like from my brother having them. But I would just look at them all the time, and they fold out really wide too. Like you fold them multiple times. And like one side is Autobots, one side is Decepticon. You flip it over, and I would just look at it for hours. I want this one, I want that one, and this one.
Yeah, they really knew how to appeal to us as kids, but nowadays, just there's no market for it. I feel like.
Well, it's the internet now. Also, everything you want to find, you just like, hey, what are the new Transformers toys that are going out? Google, and then bam, you can find it. I loved as a kid. I was also a huge fan of like a lot of action figures used to have the artwork on the back of the boxes of what was coming next. Like, oh, that's who's in this series because we don't know. As kids, there was nothing where we could just go online and look at it. We would just look at the back of the box and go, oh, great. It's these 4 guys that are in this series this time. I can't wait to see get all of them and see who's in the next one.
Right, and you didn't have an internet back then, so let's say if you just walked into Toys R Us one day and you saw a new set of figures, and all you had to do was look at the back of the box, you got excited as hell for what was coming out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
they could
still... Are they even, like, commercials for toys anymore?
You barely see the commercials now. Maybe if you're watching like Nickelodeon, you might see like one thing every now and then, but not for like Transformer figures.
Yeah, nothing. Like those commercials were amazing back then. Like the artwork, like the original Optimus commercial and like Jazz and Prowl. They had like a little like cartoon in the beginning.
Yeah, they would be designed by Marvel, and they would do the same thing with G.I. Joe. They would have like little cartoon shots spliced in with pictures of kids playing with the toys. And they did that for a couple of lines. They did it for RoboCop. They did it for, I think, they did it for Batman, and they also did some stuff for Ghostbusters. Yeah, there were like all kinds of like those commercials really also got you hyped up for the toys as well.
Even in Japan, they would do that. They would integrate fan-based items like, for instance, Dragon Ball Z. They would throw in little cuts and stuff to sell a studying desk. It was like a Dragon Ball Z studying desk. It's hilarious to me. But yeah, they really don't market toys the way they used to. And I get it, the internet's out, but they should utilize it more. Maybe put a child-friendly app out there that you can scan the back of a barcode to see what new figures are coming up. The only way to get the scoop is to scan the barcode on the back with this app. And then have the files come up on the app or whatnot.
Yeah, and another thing too, because it's Hasbro that's producing the Transformer movies, they have a say pretty much in which characters are going to be in the films. So, it's my understanding that it's almost like they see the movies as just advertisements for themselves to sell the toys. The problem is that once in a while, and I think this happened with Dark of the Moon, where if the sales didn't do well, then they would start getting a little more extreme with who they would bring in next. So like, say, Dark of the Moon, they didn't have too many new characters outside of Sentinel Prime and, a couple of other characters. So then the next one they decide, okay, we're going to do the Dinobots now because we just need to sell new product. So that's why we got the Dinobots. Not for any creative reason, except for the fact that we got to sell more toys. And then the
Yeah.
last one wasn't all that impressive. Yes, you brought in Hot Rod, but you fucked him up. But no one else you really wanted to buy outside of that.
Yeah, they had who else? Quintessa, which was like a female version of the Quintessons.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even see any of that on the shelves.
Yeah, I think they just had like the one wave, and then the movie didn't really sell as well, so they stopped after like 1 year.
I also think that one thing that we fail to take into consideration also is that the action figure industry is. I want to say that the median age of who's buying this stuff is a lot higher than it was when we were kids. That's what we did. In the winter when there was you couldn't go outside, it was too cold. You stayed inside and you played with your action figures. Now with apps and the TVs and the internet and stuff like that, and all the stuff that's accessible to these kids, these things aren't as appealing to kids as much as they used to be. And now adult collectors are the ones who are getting into this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's all about nostalgia.
Which is fine, but then that means that they're going to have to really start marketing towards us and what we want to buy, because we don't want these crappy, like Hasbro having the rights to the movie, like Andre said, made a lot of sense for Transformers because they wanted to, market their toys and stuff. But the fact is that they weren't marketing towards kids anymore. They were marketing towards us. So really, you should have made those movies a nostalgia trip if that's who you wanted to buy your stuff.
Well, after 5 tries, they finally got that memo with Bumblebee.
Yeah, Charlie.
I do want to see it.
Yeah, Charlie, you gonna say something?
I was just saying, Walmart is reissuing like the old school Transformers in the old school packaging. They have Hot Rod, Devastator, Starscream, I believe. And then I think some of the mini bots, like Bumblebee, Cliff Jumper, I think.
Oh, Cliff Jumper too! Wow.
And then I think next month or something, or maybe Saturday, I don't know. They're releasing, Optimus. But the thing with Optimus is that he doesn't come with his trailer; it's just the cab. It's kind of weird.
And these are the same molds as the original toys?
Yeah, the same thing, same die cast, I would believe.
So let me ask you this, Charlie. Do you feel like when they start reissuing these toys that they kind of bring down the value of the originals?
Not at all. I feel if anything, it brings it up. Because, the originals are the original.
Yeah, they're just that. Sure.
And I agree with Charlie, because we've been seeing this now that Mattel's been doing this with the WWE Retro line, that they're re-releasing WWE figures that look like the old Hasbro figures that we grew up with. And I know for a fact it's driving the price of the Hasbros up, because everybody's now interested in buying them because the collections the scale is exactly the same.
Yeah.
So now I'm going online and trying to find all these older Hasbros, and they're very hard to find, and they're getting very expensive. So I think Charlie's right. I think it drives it up, because now you're like, oh, here are these reissues. That's great. Let me go on eBay and see how much the original ones from my childhood were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they could be the exact same thing, but one thing you can't replicate or remake is the fact that it's the first one. It's like series 1. I'm sure if you're a collector, you're gonna look at original Optimus Prime, and you're gonna look at the packaging and say, this is the re-released one. This isn't the original. And you can't beat the original. It's just the way it is, and the way it always will be.
Yeah.
Like even with the original Optimus Prime, 84, you have the original one, and then 85, they came out with the rub symbol. The one without the rub symbol is obviously worth more money, because it also has like the bloated bit, and it comes with a gray roller instead of a blue roller.
Yeah, it's those little differences that make it all worthwhile having the original.
So, yeah, I mean, as we start wrapping this up, I guess there's two things to ask. So, we now know that with the Bumblebee film, that it's now not a prequel to the 2007 movie, but it's a hard reboot of the franchise. So, having not seen the film, guys, what would be your hopes for the future of the Transformers film franchise?
That John Cena is in every movie.
Oh, Lord.
I knew that was gonna rise out of you, Andre.
Does it really matter if he is? You can't see, right?
You have a great point, Tom.
When it comes to the films, I just hope that I'm gonna get my hands on Bumblebee. I'm gonna sit down and gonna enjoy it with a nice big bowl of popcorn, and I'm gonna critique it so much. I feel like I'm gonna be on the defense the whole time because of all the failed attempts, but just by the way it looks, I have high hopes again. I was too scared to pay for it. Yeah, you want to watch it together? We can hold hands just in case if it's a fail, we can have each other's try on.
Well, now I'm definitely in.
Just bring your own popcorn, But
there.
I'm looking forward to it because the artwork's on point. When I saw that, I was interested. Not interested enough to pay at the box office because I just don't want to get fooled again. Right. So when it comes on Hulu or Netflix, I'm gonna give it a go. I'm gonna call you guys with hopefully with good news. And if they deliver what we've always wanted to see, I hope to see a good collection of these movies come to surface. They can touch on the human element. It looked like from the commercials of this Bumblebee movie that there was human element there, but it looked like they didn't pay too much attention to them. Like there was still a lot more Transformer in there. Because me personally, like most of the stunts that Sam Witwicky did in those movies, they were like, how did he survive that? It was just too unrealistic because they're forcing the human element onto them. I hope it goes from Earth and eventually maybe get part 2 or 3, and then I want them to venture out, go back to Cybertron, have an entire Transformers movie, no human element. Maybe even bump heads with a couple of aliens, beasts we've never seen on other planets because, these are Transformers. They can thrive and go a lot further than humans. So if they keep holding on to the human element, it's only going to hold back the Transformers. I think eventually they're just going to have to leave our solar system, go find new adventures outside of our element, and continue being what they are, Transformers.
I have to agree.
Yeah. I mean, I think.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Albert.
Honestly, I just want the entertainment value. I just want the movies to be entertaining. I want them to be fun. And I want them to be closer to what we saw when they were, when we were kids. I wanted to be closer to the origin story, to the cartoon, because that's what interested me. That's what made me want to be a fan of these things. So if you stay closer to the source material, you'll make me a happy person. And like Tom said, if Bumblebee's good and we see some improvement there, then you know what? I'm totally okay with throwing down my money for the next movie and going to see it in theaters and supporting it because it's what I want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I do have to mention before I forget, if you guys ever are curious, you can even borrow it from me because I have a good amount of them. You got to check out the Transformers comics. Because when I wasn't getting what I wanted from the movies, I looked at the comics, and that filled in the void because it's the same thing like the cartoon. It's just more. It's more realistic. It's got its political side. You have some Autobots who have PTSD from the Cybertronian wars. It's really in depth and realistic, and still has that nostalgic feeling and entertainment that I've wanted to see in the movies for a long time. So the comics have been doing me justice, and you guys should definitely check them out too.
Yeah, Charlie, what's your thoughts?
I have a couple of comics. I haven't really. I read the first I think 4. That's like the
Mm-hmm.
4 series mini issue, whatever. But I gotta get like back into reading them. But what I was gonna say was, I wish they would like take like just like maybe like the first episode of the Transformers and like fix the shit that are important, and then the original '86 movie and combine it and make that like a live action and not fuck it up.
Yeah, that'd be a good way to go about it. Yeah.
It's funny because in a comparison, Tom and I have talked about there's been a very large, a lot of rumors going around. They wanted to do a live action Cowboy Bebop movie. And Tom and I have always said, if you take the first episode of the Cowboy Bebop saga and you put that into a longer film version, that's a good way to get people into it. And I think that, Charlie, you're right. Let's go back to the original cartoons. Let's see how this all started, and let's get everybody in that way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and my feeling too is that, again, the biggest problem I've always had with the movies is just the human characters have never been that interesting. And I feel like if you've watched any of the recent Planet of the Apes movies where it's all motion capture and you have these compelling performances by Andy Serkis and the other actors playing the apes, and you're not having to deal with as many human characters who are just more like supporting roles. The Caesar character is the full-on lead. So if they could do that, and also in those movies, they're communicating mostly through sign language. They're not really talking as much to each other. So if you're challenging the audience in that sense, and you're making some great movies out of that, there is no harm in making a Transformers movie where the majority of it is the Autobots and Decepticons not just fighting each other, but interacting with one another, and not always having to interact with these human characters that are just downright just cardboard cutouts that you don't need. You don't need the military. You don't need to have Sam or Spike Witwicky be always the front and center character. You could have Optimus Prime be that leader, having to wrangle his guys, and Megatron doing what he does best to raise shit. So I think there's enough there, and you keep those same voice actors in play, you could have a really amazing film with the right people involved.
I completely agree.
Absolutely.
So, so also the last thing I always like to bring up at the end of every episode is asking you guys, like the figures that you wish you could have had when you were kids. So it's usually like the ones that they didn't make back then that would have made our childhoods extra special. Even though like we may have had an old Unicron figure today, we have a Arcee figure. We didn't have those guys back then. So what were the toys that you would have liked to have seen when you were kids?
For me, I'll just get mine out of the way really quick because I know Tom and Charlie can probably, they know the characters better. For me, I just think for me it was always a scaling issue. I just wish that they would have fixed that, and I think I would have been happy even with the characters that we got. I don't think I would have been too upset that we wouldn't have gotten certain ones, but I think I would have been happier if they were all the right size.
Mm-hmm.
I concur with Albert, and I'll just say the figures I wish I would have gotten back then were actually the ones that I had brief moments of seeing when I would go to this comic book shop around my way in Brooklyn. It was called Bulletproof, and that's where I got a lot of inside source material. I remember seeing the Transformers in like Japan. And these figures I've never seen before, like this. I remember seeing this crazy. I think he was a combiner transformer, but he had like a giant squid and a blowfish, a spiked blowfish. And I've never seen these characters before, and that's really when I started finding out about one particular figure I've always wanted, and it was Predaking. It was a combination of they were called the Predacons. And they were fierce. They were as big as like the Dinobots, except they would actually combine together. And they would stand tall like next to Devastator and look down at him. And I always felt he was so cool looking. He had a sword, a shield, and his chest had this giant lion on it. It was amazing looking. And I just I just couldn't get my hands on it. So if I could have had any figure, that would have been the one, Predaking.
What about you, Charlie?
Well, I'm trying to think. I mean, are we talking like Transformers that weren't made?
Yeah, the ones that weren't made at the time.
Okay. This is just like a freak shot, but you remember in the episode Heavy Metal War when the Titans were first made, and at one point, they're trying to defeat Devastator and they're fighting the Dinobots, and Hound uses his like hologram and makes this giant robot, and he's like laughing, and he said, "What about me?" And it's like, "Who the hell is this guy?" And they just find out it was Hound with the hologram, but I always wanted that big giant robot.
Oh, I think I remember that. Oh, that's bringing me back. Oh my god. Nice.
He kind of looked a little bit like a mix between like Skyfire and like, I don't know, like an aerial bot.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember those guys. The aerial bots, they were cool. They combined and they made Defensor, right? Superion. Wait, who was Defensor?
The Protectobot.
The Protectobots. And I remember they would actually battle the Terracons, who would combine into a Botomus.
Yeah. Abominus, yeah.
You heard the long pause. I was waiting for confirmation, Oh, man. Yeah, Charlie, you have an impressive collection. I have to check it out one day.
Yeah, you guys got to come by here one day.
Yeah, I mean,
like an invite.
I think for me, because like I said, I wasn't a collector of it when I was young, and I looking at the toy line, I think we got most of everything that they had in the movie and in the cartoon. I would say the only thing I really would have liked to have seen, besides the scaling issue, is probably I would have liked to have seen some play sets. I would have liked to see like an Autobot City or like a Cybertron type of setup where you could throw your Transformers in and have battles instead of just.
They actually did have that in the 80s. They had like a cardboard kind of like put together like battle station, I think.
Huh.
Was it Autobot City?
I forget what it was called, but it was like before the movie. It was like still like 84, 85, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes in like a board game kind of box that you put it all together, I think.
Oh man, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, I'd have to look at that.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Also, you guys just reminded me. I wish I would have had 3 figures. I can't remember the name of one of them. I know you got my back on this, Charlie. Metroplex would have been a cool figure. He was like this big city on Earth, and he was huge, and he would transform into an Autobot. Also, Omega Supreme, I think he turned into a space station, like a whole, like NASA, and he would transform into a robot. Right?
Yeah, I have both of them.
You have them?
Of course he does.
I have them.
What was the giant T-Rex Godzilla-sized Decepticon that was just as big as Metroplex? Tripticon. Yes. I wanted him so bad. Oh, you have him too?
I got the 3 then.
Oh my god.
Maybe don't invite Tom over. He might walk out with some shit.
Yeah, seriously.
But I'm saying, you guys gotta come in, man.
Charlie, I have a question for you. What's like the holy grail of your collection? Like, what's the one, what's the one huge thing you have that like is like your pride and joy?
It's kind of tough, but I'm gonna have to probably go with Predaking.
Predaking? Yeah.
See? There's a reason why I was drooling over him as a child.
Well, there you go.
But I mean, I also have Megatron in the box, Optimus in the box, but I probably have to be Predaking.
Predaking was so cool looking.
All right, guys. So.
Only sword is so tiny.
Is what?
His sword is so tiny.
His sword, really? Ah, that's a letdown.
Yeah.
What can you do? So, Andre, you were about to say?
Oh yeah, no, we're just gonna start wrapping it up now. So, so for anybody that's listening, I hope you enjoyed it. You can follow me at ajepicsproductions.com. With this podcast, you can follow us on Twitter at SilverScreenAF1. We also have a Facebook page that you could like. And if you want to email us with comments, suggestions, or even ideas for future episodes, you can email us at silverscreenafpodcast@gmail.com. You guys, plug your stuff.
So I actually just recently launched a YouTube channel. So if you guys are wrestling fans, please go to youtube.com and subscribe and like the Slam Sessions podcast on YouTube. I'd really appreciate that.
It's great being a guest on your podcast, and I'd love to do it again. It's really, it's been an opportunity to look back. I'm just glad to have been here. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, this is pretty awesome, talking to you guys about one of my favorite toys of all time, and hopefully we get to do this again. If you ever do like Ghostbusters or something, Ninja Turtles.
Well, we did Ghostbusters, but we are planning to do Turtles down the line.
I'm with that.
Oh yeah.
And also, we're definitely going to do like a Marvel one right before Avengers Endgame comes out. So I'll definitely invite you guys back for that.
Sounds good.
All right, guys. So this is the Silver Screen Action Figure Podcast. And I guess I'll see you guys at the movies. Take care.